Hello, my name is Néstor Dalmas Guerra, and together with my colleague Laura Padrón Brito, we're going to be talking about assessing the progression of difficulty in graded readers across linguistic corpus study of graded readers in English and Spanish. We come from the University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria, and we're very thankful to be able to participate in this fourth edition of the Cineco Congress. Now, firstly, we can see an overview of the points we will discuss. And then, as an introduction, we wanted to say that the value of extensive reading in second language learning has been acknowledged for some time. However, there is a growing decline in reading habits among learners. And we believe that graded readers remain essential as they present linguistically accessible stories tailored to learners' proficiency, serving as a bridge towards engaging with authentic text later on. And without such scaffolding, many students would struggle or even fail to interact meaningfully with longer unadapted works when they do reach the level. Now, this study therefore aims to reaffirm the importance of graded readers by analyzing how their linguistic complexity develops across different levels. We had four main research objectives. Firstly, we wanted to compile two specialized corpora of graded readers in English and Spanish, one drawing from the Oxford Bookworms collection and another from the Instituto Cervantes selection, respectively. Secondly, we wanted to classify and align the selected text with the CEFR levels A2, B1, and B2, ensuring consistency in level distribution across both corpora. Thirdly, we wanted to analyze the internal progression of linguistic difficulty within each corpus, determining whether the increase in complexity from one level to the next is gradual and consistent. And finally, to compare the patterns of difficulty progression between the English and Spanish corpora, assessing the degree of similarity or divergence in how the two languages structure learner level development. The methodology was utilizing the Langsbox tool to systematically examine the linguistic features of the selected graded readers in English and Spanish. Then the analysis focuses on the frequency and distribution of key lexical categories such as pronouns, nouns, adjectives, and verbs, etc., across the A2, B1, and B2 levels, with the aim of identifying shifts in complexity and lexical variety as proficiency increases or not. And finally, both intra-language within English and within Spanish, respectively, and inter-language between English and Spanish. Comparisons are carried out to assess how each language's graded readers manage difficulty progression and whether similar linguistic strategies are used across the two languages. Now we're going to see the results and then we will discuss them. But for example, we can see the frequency of many of the grammatical categories such as pronouns, adverbs, adjectives, etc. The first two levels in English compare approximately to an A2, the third and fourth to a B1, and the fifth and sixth to an B2. And as the text not only increase in difficulty with the categories, but also in length. So we can't really compare simply the frequency because obviously the longer the text, the more of each category that there will be, and therefore the frequency will increase. Therefore, the way that we compared it was in seeing how from each of these six levels, they increased respectively, and then compared it. Because of course, if we compared from the first to the last, the increase will be huge. So we wanted to see if the progression was permanent, if those percentages were similar in each level progression or not. We can see this here, and for the other levels until the sixth level, how they compare for each one. And the same with the Spanish graded readers. In this case, there were only three levels, each being an A2, B1, and B2 respectively, and we can see the same comparison take place. Now for the discussion. According to the progression consistency across levels, the English corpus, levels 1 to 6, show a smooth, mostly incremental progression in frequency for major categories, pronouns, verbs, nouns, etc., with very few dramatic jumps. The Spanish corpus, niveles 1 to 3, by contrast, displays a dip from level 1 to level 2, followed by a sharp rise in level 3, which suggests possible inconsistencies in text difficulty grading and a potential for structure rebalancing or theme-specific influences at level 3. So our question was, does the Spanish corpus lack intermediate scaffolding between levels, leading to steeper learning curves? As we can see that there was a great dip from the second to the third. So maybe the progression was not carried out appropriately. Next, we have the frequency and role of pronouns. In English, pronouns are the most frequent category across all levels, increasing steadily from 2.75 to 36.2, normalized. Now, in Spanish, the pronouns have lower frequency and erratic behavior, dropping, as we have said, at level 2 before rising sharply at level 3. Could this be because of the nature of Spanish in which subjects are often implied and the differences in syntactic structure, where subject pronouns are less obligatory. So, how do grammatical structures, such as the subject omission, affect lexical category frequency in different languages? These are all of the future research questions that we have created due to the results and the discussion, of course. Now, continuing, auxiliary verbs. Auxiliary verbs increase clearly in English. Level 1, 12.5 to level 6, 18, as normalized per 10,000 words, as I was saying. The Spanish auxiliaries remain relatively low and flat, especially noticeable considering Spanish often uses synthetic verbs, forms that don't require auxiliaries. So, to what extent do typological features like inflection and morphology in Spanish affect auxiliary verb usage and thus learner exposure? Now, according to the lexical complexity and noun frequency, both languages show noun as high frequency, but English consistently integrates them earlier. Spanish noun usage seems to rise and fall more sharply, possibly reflecting genre shifts or narrative style changes in different levels. So, is there a higher reliance on nominal constructions in English simplified text than in Spanish? And what does this say about lexical density in L2 input? So, according to the function words, English articles and prepositions show strong, smooth growth, while Spanish have more erratic movement, again showing a dip at level 2. So, this could reflect a greater structural variety or differences in simplification practices across publishers, could be. So, are graded readers simplified according to different pedagogical models in English and Spanish? And transitional versus abrupt jumps, as we have said, these English texts tend to scaffold grammar gradually, adding learner comprehension and acquisition, while Spanish texts suggest more abrupt grammatical levels, which might challenge comprehension and represent less grained leveling. So, do Spanish graded readers rely more on vocabulary control than grammatical gradation, as they could be very different? And finally, for the conclusions, we can see that firstly, English graded readers demonstrate more consistent and gradual grammatical progression, as the English corpus shows a clear and steady increase in the frequency of core grammatical structures, indicating a carefully scaffolded difficulty progression across levels, which suggests that English graded readers are generally designed with more systematic grammatical control, likely aiding learners in building up structure incrementally. Secondly, Spanish graded readers show inconsistencies and abrupt jumps in grammatical complexity. Unlike English, the Spanish corpus displays non-linear progression, especially a notable dip at the second level and a sharp increase at the third level. This could reflect less standardized leveling or differences in pedagogical design, potentially making it harder for learners to anticipate and adapt to increased complexity. These irregularities may hinder fluency development and comprehension at traditional stages for Spanish. And finally, language specific features influence frequencies and simplification strategies. Structural differences between English and Spanish, such as subject pronoun drop in Spanish and greater use of auxiliary verbs in English, directly affect the distribution of grammatical categories across corpora. Consequently, simplification strategies may vary, with English texts emphasizing consistent grammatical buildup, while Spanish texts might rely more heavily on lexical simplification or thematic variation. This highlights the importance of language sensitive approaches to designing graded readers. And finally, we wanted to thank you for your attention in this presentation. And of course, saying that in the future, we would like to further analyze all of these questions that we thought about in the discussion section. So thank you very much, and we hope you found this useful.